The courtroom was thick with tension, silence wrapping around the spectators like a tangible shroud. In the center, Michael Carter sat in his orange jumpsuit, the color a stark contrast to the polished wood surrounding him. He appeared calm, unmoved by the weight of the accusations that had mounted against him for weeks. Despite the severity of the charges, running a financial fraud scheme that had shattered countless lives, his demeanor suggested acceptance rather than fear. As prosecutors delivered their closing arguments, their voices rose and fell, casting Michael in the role of the villain in this tragic narrative. Yet, within that stifling atmosphere, a voice pierced through, small but steadfast. He didn't do it. The courtroom froze. Emma, the 8-year-old girl standing at the front, shrank under the weight of all eyes now upon her. He didn't do it, she repeated, her steady words igniting a ripple of confusion and disbelief. Who are you to say such a thing? The prosecutor, Rachel Lee, challenged, her brow furrowing in skepticism. Emma remained resolute. I can prove it, she said, her gaze unwavering on Michael. The murmurs intensified, disbelief hanging thick in the air as Judge Hargrave called for order. Proceed, young lady, he said, curiosity mingling with authority. With a deep breath, Emma stepped forward. I was in the park a few weeks ago, she began, her voice growing in conviction. I saw him. He was helping others, not hurting them. He's not the person you think he is. The courtroom erupted into chaos, attorneys scrambling to make sense of Emma's claim. The jury exchanged perplexed looks, whispers flowing like a current. As Emma's words filled the room, she felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, the chance to speak her truth at last. Emma's heart raced as she defended Michael's character. She had pieced together fragments of overheard conversations, hints of doubt about the accusations that haunted her family. Michael had been accused of being the mastermind behind a scheme that tore lives apart, but she knew there was more to the story. Amidst the cacophony, Emma spotted her mother's empty seat. The sorrowful absence felt like an echo in her chest. Emma's mother was one of the victims, left devastated and struggling to rebuild after their savings disappeared. No one knew the pain that little girl endured, or the burden she carried as the shadows of her mother's grief loomed over her. I know it was my uncle, she blurted out suddenly, her voice steady in the din. He convinced Michael to do it. He's the one who... Gasps filled the room as the eyes of everyone shifted toward the back, where Emma's Uncle Peter sat. His face turned pale, panic gripping him as he tried to maintain his composure. Emma, no. You don't understand, he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of truth bearing down upon him. Don't you see? Emma pressed on, emboldened by the urgency to untangle the web of deceit. You made it look like Michael was guilty to protect yourself. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Peter's defense crumbled. Emma's words rang clear, an accusation that shattered the illusion of family loyalty. What had once been shielded in shadows was now illuminated by the light of a child's truth. Tension filled the air, stifling yet liberating. Mixed emotions swirled. The courtroom transformed into a battleground of honesty and betrayal, the realization of an innocent man's plight igniting the room's atmosphere. Judge Hargrave motioned for order, his expressions ranging from shock to concern as he addressed Peter. Do you deny her claims? Peter stood frozen, the weight of his decisions crashing down. I didn't want to hurt anyone, he stammered, his voice trembling. I thought I was protecting our family. The confession hung heavy in the air. The trial, once seemingly straightforward, had been flipped on its head by a child's bravery. The worst secrets had a way of surfacing, and the truth now beckoned them all forward into uncharted territory. In that moment, amidst the chaos, Emma finally felt a sense of clarity. She had spoken not just for Michael, but for herself and her mother, reclaiming the fragmented pieces of her family's truth. As confusion reigned around her, she stood resolute. The battle for justice had shifted, and the first step toward liberation had begun. The sun had barely risen above the horizon when Emma's mother woke her up with a gentle nudge. Today's the day, sweetie. The trial starts today. Emma rubbed her eyes, the memories of the previous day's events still fresh in her mind. In the quiet morning hours, Emma's mother prepared breakfast, her usual smile replaced by a somber expression. Emma, honey, I need to talk to you about something. Emma's heart skipped a beat as her mother's words hung in the air. Was it about the trial? Or something else altogether? What is it? Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. I've been thinking a lot about what we've discussed, and I'm starting to piece together what actually happened. There's something I think you should know, but it's going to be hard to hear. Emma's heart felt like it was sinking into her stomach. Her mother's words were cryptic, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was walking into a trap. What is it, Mom? Emma asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother took a deep breath before speaking. Your father and I, we weren't exactly honest with you about your father's past. Emma's expression was puzzled. What do you mean? Her mother hesitated before continuing. He was involved in some shady dealings before we got married. We kept it a secret from you, from everyone. We didn't want you to think that your father that he was anything less than a good man. Emma felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Her father had always been a bit of a mysterious figure, but she had no idea that he was involved in anything so serious. Why didn't you tell me? Emma asked, her voice shaking with anger. Her mother put a gentle hand on her shoulder. We didn't want to hurt you, sweetie. We thought that if we kept it a secret, we could protect you. Emma's mind was racing with questions. What kind of dealings did her father get involved in? Was it related to Peter's accusations? And why did her mother keep this from her for so long? As they finished breakfast, Emma couldn't shake off the feeling that she was standing at the edge of a precipice, staring down into a vast and unknown expanse. Secrets and shadows seemed to be closing in around her, threatening to consume her. The trial was just beginning, but for Emma, it felt like she was already lost in a labyrinth of lies and deceptions. The courtroom was buzzing with activity as the trial got underway. Judge Hargrave took his seat, his eyes surveying the packed room before turning to the prosecutor, Rachel Lee. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the case before us today is a complex and disturbing one. The defendant, Michael Carter, stands accused of fraud and deceit. But as we delve deeper into the details of this case, it becomes clear that there is more to this story than meets the eye. As the judge spoke, Emma felt a sense of unease wash over her. She knew that the truth was about to come to light, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The prosecutor called her first witness, and Emma's heart skipped a beat as she saw Peter Carter take the stand. Her uncle's eyes met hers, and for a moment, they just stared at each other, the air thick with tension. I'm ready to testify, Peter said, his voice firm. Rachel Lee smiled, her eyes glinting with determination. Very well, Mr. Carter. Let's begin. As Peter began his testimony, Emma felt like she was trapped in a nightmare. Her uncle's words were laced with lies and half-truths, and she knew that she had to speak out against him. But as she raised her hand to speak, she was interrupted by her mother's gentle touch on her arm. Not yet, sweetie, her mother whispered. It's not time yet. Emma bit back her words, knowing that she had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. But as the trial continued, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was walking on a tightrope. One wrong move and everything could topple over. The day wore on, the tension building as the testimony mounted. Emma's heart was racing, her mind reeling with questions and doubts. But as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the courtroom, Emma knew that she had to confront the truth. She took a deep breath, her eyes locked on her uncle's, and she spoke out for the first time. Your Honor, I have something to say, Emma's voice echoed through the courtroom, halting the proceedings. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly, his expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. Very well, Miss Carter. Please proceed, Judge Hargrave said, his voice firm but gentle. Emma stood up, her heart racing with anticipation. She had been waiting for this moment for what felt like an eternity. As she began to speak, her words poured out like a river, each one a testament to the turmoil that had been brewing inside her. I know my uncle, Peter Carter, has been testifying against my father, Michael Carter. But I need to tell you that not everything he's saying is true. I've heard him talking to my father, arguing about money and debts. I know he's been trying to cover something up, but I don't think my father is the only one responsible. The courtroom erupted into a chorus of murmurs and gasps. Peter's face turned red with rage, while Michael's eyes sparkled with a glimmer of hope. Rachel Lee, the prosecutor, raised an eyebrow, her expression a mixture of surprise and intrigue. "Go on, Miss Carter," Judge Hargrave encouraged, his voice calm and steady. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "I've seen documents, papers that my uncle has been hiding. I think they might be important to the case. And I'm willing to testify that my uncle has been manipulating my family, using us to get what he wants." The room fell silent, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning. Peter's face had turned beet red, his eyes blazing with fury. Michael's eyes, on the other hand, shone with gratitude, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. Rachel Lee's eyes narrowed, her mind racing with the implications of Emma's testimony. "Your Honor, I request a recess to confer with my team and assess the new information," she said, her voice firm and confident. Judge Hargrave nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Very well, Counselor. The court is recessed for 30 minutes. Miss Carter, please remain available for further questioning." As the courtroom erupted into chaos, Emma felt a sense of pride and purpose wash over her. She had spoken out, had taken a stand against her uncle's deceit. But as she caught Peter's eye, she saw a glimmer of malice, a warning that this was far from over. The recess was a blur of activity, with lawyers and witnesses hurrying to and fro. Emma's mother found her in the hallway, a look of concern etched on her face. "Emma, sweetie, are you okay? That was very brave of you to speak out," she said, her voice soft and gentle. Emma nodded, her heart still racing with adrenaline. "I had to, Mom. I couldn't just sit there and let him lie about Dad." Her mother smiled, a look of pride on her face. "You're a strong and courageous young woman, Emma. I'm so proud of you." As they returned to the courtroom, Emma felt a sense of trepidation. She knew that the trial was far from over, that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But she was ready, her voice and her heart prepared to face whatever came next. The judge's gavel struck the desk, signaling the resumption of the trial. Rachel Lee stood up, a look of determination on her face. "Your Honor, in light of the new information, I request that the court allow us to recall a witness and present additional evidence," she said, her voice firm and confident. Judge Hargrave nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Very well, Counselor. The court will allow it. But be warned, the defense will have the opportunity to respond and present their own evidence." As the trial continued, Emma felt a sense of hope rising within her. She had spoken out, had taken a stand against her uncle's deceit. And as the truth began to unravel, she knew that justice would be served, no matter what the cost. Emma sat in her chair, her heart pounding as Rachel Lee prepared to call her father back to the stand. She knew this was a pivotal moment in the trial, the moment that could turn the tide in their favor or plunge them deeper into uncertainty. "Mr. Carter," Rachel began, her voice steady and authoritative. "We have just heard startling claims from your daughter, Emma. Can you tell us your relationship with your brother, Peter, and if you believe his testimony is reliable?" Michael took a breath, his demeanor calming as he faced the courtroom and his daughter. "Peter was always the more ambitious one, ever since we were kids. I never wanted the power plays or shady dealings. It's not who I am." The jury listened intently, and Emma felt the weight of her father's words. She could see the gears turning in their heads, and she hoped they would recognize the authenticity in his voice. "Did you ever have conflicts with him regarding money or business?" Rachel probed, her eyes piercing. "Of course," Michael responded. "When he lost a business deal 2 years ago, he implied I was responsible. He held me accountable for the failures in his life. I think he's trying to pin his mistakes on me now." Peter shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing the testimony was turning against him. Emma could see the frustration and desperation in his eyes. "Mr. Carter, is it possible you were involved in fraudulent activities?" Rachel pressed, an edge to her voice. "No," Michael's voice was firm. "I run an honest business. Families depend on us. I may have made mistakes, but fraud is not one of them. Peter is trying to take my reputation down with him." The tension in the room was palpable. Rachel Lee turned her attention to the jury, a determined look on her face. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I have no further questions." Judge Hargrave turned to the defense attorney, a wiry man with a slick mane of hair and a confident smirk. "Mr. Hale, you may begin your cross-examination." Hale leaned in with a predatory gaze. "Mr. Carter, have you ever borrowed money from your brother?" "Yes, but only to help him when he was struggling," Michael replied. "Isn't it true that you've failed to repay him, and that he feels you owe him now?" Hale continued, relentlessly pushing. "I have paid what I owe," Michael affirmed. "Peter is bitter because he can't accept responsibility for his own failures." Hale stumbled for a moment, realizing he wouldn't extract the reaction he wanted from Michael. He shifted his tactic. "And how close were you to your brother before this trial?" "Close growing up, but our relationship soured as we became adults. Mostly because of his choices," Michael said, casting a sidelong glance at Peter. After what felt like a relentless barrage of questions, Hale finally stepped back. The tension in the courtroom hung thick as Rachel Lee prepared to address the jury again. "All the evidence leads us to a singular truth. Peter Carter is attempting to deflect blame for his own failures from himself to my client," she stated clearly. "I urge you to look beyond the surface of these accusations and understand the motives behind them." As she finished her argument, Emma felt a wave of hope wash over her. But she also felt a sense of dread. Would it be enough? The court took a brief recess, and Emma used the time to talk to her father. "Dad, I believe you. I really do," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Thank you for standing by me, Emma. This has been as hard for you as it has for me," he replied, brushing away a tear from her cheek. When the courtroom reconvened, the judge announced it was time to hear the closing arguments. Rachel Lee stood tall, exuding confidence as she addressed the jury. "The truth is clear. My opponent wants you to believe in deceit, betrayal, and lies. But in reality, the lies came from Peter, who is attempting to save himself from accountability. Trust in the integrity of the evidence presented, and remember what my client represents." Finally, it was the defense's turn. Hale leaned against the podium, casually crossing his arms, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Ladies and gentlemen, do not let the innocence facade of Michael Carter distract you. Family disputes are often messy, just like this case. The truth is simple. People make unfortunate decisions. Don't let one person's testimony blind you from the bigger picture. Sometimes, it's the ones we cling to most that deceive us." Emma felt anger bubbling up inside her but kept her composure. She took a deep breath, focusing on the path forward rather than on Peter's cruel words. As the trial wrapped up, the jury ventured into deliberation. The longer they were gone, the more anxious Emma felt. She exchanged nervous glances with her father and mother, their fates hanging in the balance. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned, the foreman rising to address the judge. "Your Honor, we, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Carter, not guilty of all charges." Cheers erupted in the courtroom, and tears of relief streamed down Emma's cheeks. They hugged tightly, a family pulled back from the brink. But as the noise faded, Emma's eyes met Peter's, and she knew that the shadows were not fully dispelled. There would be challenges to face ahead. But today, justice had prevailed. Emma felt a newfound strength within her, courage to speak up, to stand firm against deceit, and to fight for what was right. With her family by her side, whatever the future held, she was ready to confront it head-on. Epilogue: A New Dawn. In the days that followed, Emma and Michael began to rebuild their lives. Peter was held accountable for his actions, facing legal consequences for his deception. Yet, the scars of betrayal would remain as a reminder of the events they had overcome. Emma decided to take the lessons she learned into her own life. She became active in her community, using her voice to advocate for honesty and integrity. While shadows would linger, Emma learned that within them, there was always light to pursue. And together with her family, she faced each day with the pledge to uphold the truth. And thus concludes Emma's journey, a tale not just of a trial, but of courage, resolution, and the undeniable bond of family.